The Battle of Asal Uttar is often remembered as a three-day clash from 8 to the 10th of September 1965, when Pakistan's armored thrust in the Kemkaran sector was broken in the fields around Asal Uttar. That memory is powerful, and it is not wrong, but it can make the battle seem as if the whole campaign ended the moment the Pattons stopped moving. In reality, the fighting in the Kemkaran sector continued after the famous armored climax. Units still had to hold ground, recover from shock, reorganize damaged formations, defend against renewed pressure, and manage the consequences of what had just happened. The battle after the battle matters because victory on a battlefield is rarely a clean ending. It is a transition into the next military problem. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. The first problem was simply control. After days of fighting, the battlefield around Asal Uttar was confused, damaged, and dangerous. Tanks lay destroyed or abandoned. Fields had been churned by tracks and shell fire. Minefields remained uncertain, and the line between safe ground and lethal ground was not always obvious. Soldiers who had survived the armored attack still had to occupy positions, watch for renewed movement, and sort through contradictory reports. Commanders had to know which units were intact, which needed relief, where ammunition was low, and where the enemy might still be capable of local action. A famous victory does not automatically give an army clarity. It gives an army an opportunity, and that opportunity can be wasted if order is not restored. For India, the defense had succeeded in its central purpose. The road toward Bikiwind, Hariki, and the Bayas crossings had not opened. But that did not mean the Kemkaran sector was secure in every sense. Kemkaran itself had been lost earlier, and Pakistani forces still held ground in the area. Indian formations had to balance pride in stopping the armored thrust with the practical reality that the front remained contested. The men of 4th Mountain Division and supporting armored units had endured severe strain, and a damaged formation cannot simply celebrate and become fresh again. Defensive victory had to be converted into a stable posture. That meant replenishment, reorganization, recovery, and continued vigilance. For Pakistan, the failure of the breakthrough did not erase the need to hold a front. The armored offensive had lost its operational promise, but Pakistani forces still had soldiers, guns, tanks, and defensive responsibilities in the wider sector. A failed offensive often leaves an army in a dangerous state, forward enough to be exposed, damaged enough to be cautious, and politically pressured enough to avoid admitting failure too quickly. Commanders had to decide what could still be held, what could be recovered, and whether further attacks had any realistic chance of changing the situation. The battle after the battle was therefore also a test of damage control. When armored ambition fails, an army must prevent that failure from becoming a larger collapse. Recovery of vehicles became one of the most visible tasks. Tanks are valuable not only because of their cost, but because every serviceable vehicle represents future combat power. Both sides had reasons to recover damaged machines where possible, salvage parts, clear routes, and prevent the enemy from turning wrecks into trophies. Yet recovery work after an armored battle is dangerous. Minefields may not be fully marked, unexploded ammunition can detonate, artillery may still reach the area, and a disabled tank may sit in ground exposed to enemy observation. Recovery crews and engineers rarely occupy the heroic center of public memory, but they are essential to armored warfare. Without them, an army's tank strength bleeds away faster than production or reinforcement can replace it. The infantry battle also continued in less spectacular but important ways. Villages, field edges, and local strongpoints still mattered because they shaped the line after the main armored blow failed. Infantry had to patrol, dig, guard obstacles, and prevent the enemy from probing weaknesses. This work lacked the dramatic visibility of tank engagements, yet it decided whether the battlefield remained under control. A defensive box that held during the attack could not simply dissolve afterward. It had to be maintained, adjusted, and connected to the wider front. Infantrymen who had already faced tanks at close range now had to endure fatigue, shell fire, uncertainty, and the knowledge that the enemy might try again in some form. Survival remained an active duty. Artillery remained central because the front did not go silent. Guns could discourage renewed concentrations, support local defensive actions, harass movement, and protect recovery or regrouping efforts. Artillery also helped define what each side could safely attempt after the main battle. If a road or forming up area was under observation and within range, movement there became dangerous. If artillery ammunition was short or observation poor, opportunities could be lost. The battle after Asal-Uttar therefore still belonged to combined arms. Tanks had become the famous image, but artillery, infantry, engineers, and logistics now determined whether the result could be held. A tank battle may reach its climax in direct fire, but its consequences are secured by less visible arms. The wider Indian command had to decide how much to exploit and how much to consolidate. This is a difficult question after any defensive success. Pursuit can magnify victory if the enemy is truly broken, but it can become costly if the defender leaves prepared ground and runs into a reorganized enemy. In the Kemkaran sector, Indian forces had to consider their own losses, fatigue, and the continuing war along other fronts. The temptation to reclaim every lost yard immediately had to be measured against the need to preserve the forces that had just stopped a major thrust. Armored warfare teaches this repeatedly. A successful defense does not automatically become a successful counteroffensive. The conditions for each are different. Later brigade actions in the sector remind us that official military history often records a longer, messier campaign than public memory preserves. Public memory prefers the dramatic core, the withdrawal, the defensive box, the smashed Pattons, and the legend of Patton Nagar. Operational history has to follow the less tidy continuation, where brigades still maneuver, units still hold or attack local positions, and commanders still try to improve the line before diplomacy or exhaustion freezes the front. That later fighting may not have the same iconic force, but it mattered to the soldiers involved and to the final shape of the sector. The famous battle was the centerpiece, not the entire military story. The battle after the battle also shaped memory because the physical battlefield began turning into evidence. Destroyed tanks, captured equipment, damaged villages, and scarred fields became part of the story that each army told itself and its public. For India, the evidence supported a narrative of defensive skill against a stronger-looking armored thrust. For Pakistan, the same battlefield demanded explanation, reassessment, and in some accounts, argument about command, terrain, and execution. This is common after a failed offensive. The fighting ends, and then the struggle over meaning begins. Yet military education must resist letting later pride or embarrassment flatten the operational reality. The Kemkaran sector remained a place of fighting, work, fear, and recovery after the most famous images were made. The human aftermath was just as important as the operational one. Wounded soldiers needed evacuation and treatment. Dead men had to be recovered and identified where possible. Crews who escaped disabled tanks carried physical injuries and memories of fire, smoke, and confinement. Infantrymen who had held villages had to live with what they had seen at close range. Civilians faced damaged homes, disrupted harvests, mined or dangerous fields, and the fear that the fighting might return. The phrase "after the battle" can sound calm, but for those on the ground, it often means the continuation of suffering under a different name. War does not end for a landscape the moment historians identify a turning point. The battle after the battle matters because it restores proportion to Asal-Uttar. The three-day armored clash was decisive in stopping Pakistan's main thrust through Kemkaran, but the sector still required holding, clearing, reorganizing, and explaining. This is part of the larger evolution of armored warfare. Tanks can produce dramatic crises, and their destruction can produce dramatic memories, but modern mechanized war is sustained by systems that continue before and after the moment of armored decision. Logistics, engineers, artillery, infantry, command, recovery, and morale all remain at work when the tanks stop. Asal-Uttar became famous because the offensive failed. It remained important because the defenders converted that failure into a durable result on a still dangerous front.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.